You know, Nick, every single time the Treasurer says renewables are cheap, that the cheapest form of energy, he might be talking about their generation. He's not talking about getting them to market, you know, getting them from where the turbine turns or the sun hits the solar panel, getting it from that paddock to your power point. 37% increase to power bills. I'm not telling any of our viewers anything they don't know. They are paying for these bills. But surely the government has got to stop that lie, given these stats are coming in month after month. And we also know they promised big at 2 elections and they have not delivered.
I think certainly the public are cottoning onto this, Peter, thanks to a large part because the reminder that comes through their letterboxes every quarter. But I thought the interview last night with Matt Keane that was on Sky News, that Andrew Clennell did. I thought that was very telling, because Andrew pressed Matt Keane, who is essentially, the mouthpiece for the government on these issues. He pressed him time and time again. So when will prices come down? And Keane just couldn't say. He obviously could not deny they've gone up, that the $275 reduction off our power bills did not happen, that renewables are not cheaper at the moment, but could not say when they would be. So I just think that this is just collapsing as a narrative, and I think that it's part of the reason, or a large part of the reason why, as you said earlier, Bowen is not long for this position.
Let's go to those comments today in the speech at the Press Club by the Shadow Treasurer Ted O'Brien, and I thought he was very shrewd to make the point, Dan, that the budget would be blowing out by a further $100 billion over the next decade if it wasn't for bracket creep. People at home might think, oh, well, good on bracket creep. Well, bracket creep just means you are paying more, that you're falling into another tax bracket just by natural increases in your wages that are offset anyway by what you're paying with inflation. So, you know, this is not a good thing. This is coming from your pocket, Australia. And so unless the system, the progressive tax system, is reformed, poor old punters will be paying as they always do.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, obviously the Liberal Party is sensitive to having gone to the last election promising higher taxes rather than lower taxes. So this is, I think, is a way of them trying to get around that and say, well, Labor's going to crank up your taxes just through bracket creep alone. I think there's an issue here, which is that Australia is heavily reliant on income tax compared to any comparable nation for our overall tax take. It's one of the highest of any comparable nation, and that means that salary earners have to carry the back of the entire budget. I think the other point, Peter, is that we need our political leaders to start actually talking about economic growth. You know, when was the last time we had a political leader, state or federal, talk about growing the economy? You know, as I mentioned before, the government's own budget says they're only going to get 2.5% real economic growth. Hawke had it at 4 or 5% real economic growth. Howard had it over the 3% year after year. So the only way we're going to get out of these problems, the debt, the deficit, the high taxes, is to grow the economy. And we need to have leaders who are ambitious for that, to try to get to 4 or 5% real growth once again. Now, yes, there'll be some in the media who say, well, that's never going to happen. Those days are behind us. But we can absolutely do it. But to start with, you actually have to have that as the ambition and as the aim. And I hope that the coalition has a big, ambitious economic growth agenda that they take to the public at the next election.
Well, Nick, you can grow the economy, as Dan rightly says. This is a productivity measure by getting off the back of small business, by getting off the back of business broadly, cutting red tape, making it easier to come into Australia and start something up and hire people and grow and keep the tax burden low. Or you can grow the economy with the Ponzi scheme of immigration, which is what they're trying to do, and they've been doing this now ever since Labor got into power. They'll say all the right things at the election about cutting immigration. By the end of this year, it will be at Australia's highest level over a 12-month period in history. So forget what they say, look at what they do. And of course, they're not willing to really do what they should do and cut spending. You know, they're going to do some rats and mice cuts, they say, about department spending, but they're not going after the big programs. They're not looking at things like the welfare system. They're just going to go through, you know, paper clips and staplers down at the Department of Finance or something like that. They're not serious about really getting the budget into repair.
No, that's right. And I think what the government is now facing is the reality coming home after more than 3 years in government. In this second term, it's going to be much, much harder for them to pursue the line that 28% of GDP spent on government, it doesn't matter. You know, the increase from less than 25% to 28%. They were lucky in the first term because, as you remember, we had that great royalties boom and other things in our favour, which meant that it didn't really add to gross debt, and it seemed like they were going to get away with it, that the new magic economics that they're preaching was working. But that is not going to work from now on. We're seeing it with energy prices. That whole narrative is now destroyed. And we'll see it soon with this idea that governments can keep on spending as much as they like. And it doesn't matter. It does matter. And they're beginning to find out about that. And it'll, in 2 years' time, as we approach the next election, let's hope the coalition is match fit, because it's going to be a very winnable election.
Now, this is a worry. We've got a credit ratings downgrade for Tasmania. This is from Moody's. Downgraded Tasmania today to the lowest of all the Australian states. The Treasurer at a press conference was asked whether he would have to intervene. Let's have a listen.
Obviously, I'm aware of developments in Tasmania and it's a crucial part of the Commonwealth and a crucial part of our national economy. We haven't been contemplating any kind of bailout for Tasmania.
I'll tell you what, Dan, the budget in Tassie is spare change compared to the mess in Victoria. There it'll be $236 billion. If a bailout's required in Victoria, that'll hit the Commonwealth's rating.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the bailouts are coming. The bailouts are already here, really. I mean, Victoria has had an increase to its GST allocation, which means that other states get less because Victoria's economy is just so bad, it's been destroyed. There's no doubt that Tasmania is going to get a bailout. The federal government has also decided to keep underwriting the Boondoggle suburban rail loop, giving more money to that, because if the state government was going to try and finance that, you would see a downgrade straight away. And, you know, most of your viewers aren't in Victoria, but the reason we talk about Victoria so much is that if Victoria goes down, it's going to drag the entire nation down with it, not just through the bailouts that are going to happen, but through reducing the overall size of the Australian economy. You know, what happens in Victoria is going to come to another state, whether it's Tasmania or elsewhere, and there's no ambition in Victoria whatsoever to try to fix the budget at all. So I very much think, and particularly when we come towards an election, I guarantee you there's going to be handouts left, right and centre going into Victoria and Tasmania.
Just on that in Victoria, breaking news this afternoon, political editor Shannon Deary at the Herald Sun says the government's just announced they're going to have a special sitting of the Parliament, the Victorian Parliament, on December 9, and the Premier will get to her feet and make a formal apology to the state's Indigenous population. Now, we have the Rudd apology, we've got Reconciliation Week, we've got National Sorry Day, we've got Closing the Gap Day. I mean, really and truly, you know, you can't open an envelope in Victoria without a welcome to country. What on earth will this achieve?
Well, it's going to achieve absolutely nothing. It's divisive. Victorians don't want this. Victorians voted no to the voice. Victorians strongly oppose the treaty by over 60%, oppose the treaty when they understand what is actually in it. As you rightly say, another apology at the state level won't do anything to fix real problems in Indigenous communities in remote areas. So I just think Victorians and Australians are well and truly sick of this. We've seen a sharp turn of the public, a very sharp turn against welcome to country ceremonies and acknowledgement to country and everything else, the three flags as well. People are over this, and we need the Liberal Party here in Victoria to campaign hard on these issues.
You're not wrong. We'll leave it there. Thank you, gentlemen.